Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Also check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you would like to enjoy this as an audio only experience. Well, it's been quite a ride doing hot takes this entire NBA season, and we are at a close. Hot takes is always suspended for playoff time just because there's way too much going on. This is going to be our last hot takes for a minute, and I decided to make this one playoff themed and ask you guys in a community post for your playoff specific takes. Here is your last hot takes of the season, the playoff edition. Let's get into it. From MPT7479, the Thunder will fall in the second round due to Shai having a 2011 LeBron type of meltdown. The interesting angle of that is it a LeBron-like meltdown if it's not LeBron, if you get what I'm saying? Obviously, you are angling this as he's just going to have a disastrous series, so yeah, I get that angle, but this is the fun part about the way that people talk about these guys is they'll deny they're all-time great players while simultaneously saying that they're capable of destroying or hurting their legacy in the way that LeBron did, which you can only do if you're an all-time great basketball player. So I would agree that this is possible, but you also would have to agree that he's one of the best players who's ever played this game to feel that it would exist in that kind of context, not just as a meltdown, but one, related to when the possible greatest player of all time melted down. So I don't think he's going to flounder that significantly. It's plausible as it is with anybody else, but that's a bet I'm not going to make. From MC, the Timberwolves are the biggest threat to OKC in this coming playoffs. I don't know. I do think the Minnesota Timberwolves match up very well against the Thunder, so they do have that working in their favor, but I don't think I would go as far as to say they're the biggest threat just because, the talent of the Los Angeles Lakers is so overwhelming, even if the matchup is less so in their favor. I would say at least the Lakers, probably the Warriors, and maybe the Clippers before the Timberwolves, but of the bottom tier teams of the Western Conference, I would say that the Timberwolves are indeed a good threat to the Thunder. The Clippers will finally get a fully healthy Kawhi this postseason and make a run to the finals. I would really love for that to be true. Goulian is a good name. That's a good one right there. No one should make the bet that Kawhi is healthy, but God, I would love for it to happen. It'd be really funny if the Clippers finally made the finals after basically everybody went back on their original investment, as they should have, just to be clear, but that would be a hell of a story. From Sam Fornan, coaches are being held to way too high of a standard and are getting fired despite establishing winning cultures. Taylor Jenkins, Michael Malone, even Adrian Griffin last year. Well, I think the problem that head coaches have is they are the most easily replaced job, basically, that's important for an NBA team. Players are not going to go before coaches do pretty much ever. That used to be the older way of treating the game, but that's really just not what the tradition is in the modern NBA. I think that kind of turned the tides with Deron Williams and Jerry Sloan, I want to say is the right name there, but I could be mistaken. I don't know. But the reason why Taylor Jenkins and Michael Malone got fired is they were kind of at their ceiling. The teams, they got them to where they got them, and then the rest of it just seems like the progress had halted. And sometimes a team gets a lot of development from one coach, but it takes another coach to take them all the way. Think of like Mark Jackson with the Warriors. He did a decent job coaching them, but they needed to make an upgrade in that department. And in terms of just making a big swing, coaching is the easiest way to make a big swing without usually too major of consequences, because I think the baseline standard NBA head coach is enough to win a championship if the roster construction is good enough. You don't really necessarily need to have one of the best coaching talents in the league to be a very good team in the modern NBA. Because of that, because the floor with coaching being not so great is so high, the general attitude is like, if we get rid of Mike Malone, and then we're just kind of well, we were just kind of before. So we haven't really gotten worse. We've just kind of stagnated. And by making this move, we've opened up the opportunity to do something else. It's a shitty position to be in, but I think at this point, if you're an NBA head coach and you aren't going into it prepared to be a scapegoat, then you probably just weren't built for the job, period. Being a head coach in the NBA means being a professional scapegoat these days. From Ashton Krosniak. The Knicks have been slept on as of late. With Brunson coming back, they pose a bigger threat to the Celtics than the Cavs. Yeah, I just don't know about that, dude. The Knicks are a team that just is frustrating to me. A team that seems like it could get the pieces together, and yet they never seem to actually do that. And I can't say that they're a bigger threat than the Cavs because they're just a significantly worse team than the Cavs. I mean, I can get behind the argument that they match up better. I don't know that I agree, but if you want to have that perspective, that's fine. But the Cavs are just a significantly better team. So they're a better team. They are definitely a bigger threat than the Knicks are. All respect to the matchup factor. There's a talent difference that is just undeniable. There's a system difference. There's a depth difference. I think Tom Thibodeau has kind of seen better days in terms of his coaching of this Knicks team. And now that he's actually at an influx with talent, when usually his best skill set is stretching his dollar, I think they probably need to make some direction changes because they have the talent. The starting lineup is great, but they need a bench. They need a coach that's not going to overextend them, and they need a coach that has modern basketball principles, because the fact that since the trade deadline they've been like 28th in three-point attempts per game says a lot about the mentality of the guy running that ship. Being that they have the three-point shooting talent that they do, that shit don't make no sense. From Base Up 12, this is the most unpredictable finals in the past decade. The two favorite teams in the East and West, Boston, Cleveland, OKC, and Lakers, all have significant weaknesses and all potentially won't even make the finals. I don't think OKC has a significant weakness, but we'll move on. The Lakers are relying too hard on star power, and their defense is the most exploitable of the top teams. OKC has only one elite scorer. That is true. They only have one elite scorer, but they have two good ones after that, and most teams don't have more than one elite scorer. I don't even think the Boston Celtics have two undeniably like unstoppable or elite scorers. Rather, Jaylen Brown can be an elite scorer, but not always. Jason Tatum can be an elite scorer, but not always. Boston is older, with their team in general having a down year compared to last year, and Cleveland does not have a top 5 level player. Last time a team without a top 5 guy won was Detroit in 2000. In the 2000s, 2004. That's not true. The 2014 Spurs didn't have a top 5 guy. And I also, while yes, in the 2020s, every team has had a top 5 guy, I feel like that top 5 guy has mattered the least towards those teams' success than at any other point in history. But we're getting into semantics here. Teams like the Knicks, Clippers, Warriors have a chance to be in the finals, and dark horses like the Nuggets, Grizzlies, and Pacers also possess the ability to upset the top 2 teams. I can get behind this being the most unpredictable finals in the past decade. However, I think it's very easy to predict that it will be OKC versus Cleveland or Boston. Basically 9 times out of 10, more likely than not. OKC to me is just head and shoulders better than the rest of the teams in the West. The only team that does have a chance of eclipsing that is the Los Angeles Lakers because of their overwhelming star power, as you mentioned. But I don't know. I think OKC having only one elite scorer is a very light criticism by comparison to everything else here, and I wouldn't quite say they're on an even plane. That said, no one's guaranteed to make the finals, and there's a lot of competition in the West, so even if the Thunder do make the finals, it's not going to be easy to get there. The most unpredictable finals in the past decade, I don't know, did anyone think that we were getting Bucks Suns in 2021? I don't know how predictable that was. Or what about Denver Nuggets versus Miami Heat? The 8th seeded, I think it was that year, they were 8th seeded Miami Heat. That's a pretty fucking unpredictable finals. I don't even think the Nuggets were the favorite in the Western Conference that year. I'm pretty certain they weren't. I don't know if it's the most unpredictable, but it is a very unpredictable one. But in an era where I think we have persistently gotten unpredictable finals, I feel like you could argue almost every finals of the 2020s has been extremely difficult to predict. And if anything, that's been towards the detriment of the league because, as I always like to say, dorky freak NBA fans like myself who care way too much love to see a league full of parity. The average NBA fan and the average sports fans in general consume the sports through the lens of dynasties. And when you don't have those, when you don't have a persistent narrative, team, player, or whatever, it makes the storytelling of the league significantly rather harder. That's something that's missing in the modern game. But in terms of unpredictability, I don't think we're short on unpredictability. There's plenty of unpredictability to go around. From Checker Champ, the Indiana Pacers are the clearest third best team in the East and have the highest chance of upsetting their way into a conference finals appearance. I don't know if they're clear. I think the Knicks and the Pistons could be better. And apparently there's a chance Damian Lillard returns for the playoffs. I don't think he's going to do it, though. And I think getting Dame and Giannis together in that context is just too little too late. They're not going to figure it out just in time for the playoffs, as nice as that would be. I don't know. I think you can pick the Pacers as the third best team in the East. That's reasonable. Since the trade deadline, they've actually had the second best record in the East over the Cleveland Cavaliers, who've kind of been slipping lately. But I think the Knicks, and especially, I really believe in the Detroit Pistons a lot. I think the Detroit Pistons could be just as good as the Pacers as well. Hey, here we got some Pistons takes, right as I say that, from TY Guy 916. The Pistons make the conference finals after beating both the Knicks and Celtics. Also, if the standings remain the same, the Lakers and Nuggets are the first round outs. They play the Warriors and Clippers respectively. Yeah, that's definitely plausible depending. I mean, the standings will move around for sure, so I don't know how likely that is, but there's going to be a team or two that gets first round exited this year that people are not expecting to get first round exited. Not that that's untrue every year, but Nuggets and the Lakers being first round exits would surprise a lot of people, especially the Lakers. But beating the Knicks for the Pistons, I think, is reasonable. Beating the Celtics, I just don't think that's going to happen, and it's for one simple reason. On the offensive end of the floor, it's going to be Cade Cunningham versus the entire Boston Celtics. I'm not saying guys like Malik Beasley and Tobias Harris will not do a good enough job supplementing the offense against some of the better teams in the East. With how much Cade Cunningham is dependent on to create, the Boston Celtics are going to throw hell at that guy. He's going to have a big wing on him more often than not, and when he does manage to get the luxury of a guard being on him, it's going to be Drew Holiday and Derek White. Those are your best options. Jaylen Brown's got the size to make his size at the guard position nothing, just like Jason Tatum does. They're probably going to bring two to the ball damn near every time he touches the thing. Like, he's just going to have the deck stacked against him so significantly on the offensive end of the floor that, like, I just don't think anybody else is going to be on the Pistons is going to be able to make up for it. Even if Beasley and Tobias both have great series, I don't think they're going to be able to shine well enough to make up for the fact that Cade Cunningham is going to have the biggest defensive shitstorm thrown at him of his entire NBA career. I recorded a video earlier about playoff dark horses, and I talked about the Detroit Pistons as a potential dark horse. And I just can't see them getting by the Celtics for that reason. To me, that's just a little bit too tough of a sell. Not that the Pistons can't get by the Celtics eventually, but rather they're going to need a high-level second option before that happens. Luckily, Devin Booker is going to be a Detroit Piston, so it doesn't matter. From Best Shooter Man UBZ, playoff Jimmy Butler never happens and the Warriors end up losing in the first round. I don't agree with that because I don't think the Warriors lose in the first round just simply because playoff Jimmy doesn't happen. It can depend on the matchup. But as of right now, there's a handful of teams towards the bottom of the West playoffs that they would match up against that I'm very confident they could win in a series where Jimmy Butler averages 15, 4, and 5 against some of the top teams in the league, against the true contenders, the Lakers and the OKC Thunder. Yeah, you're going to need him to elevate his game to get by them, especially the Thunder. In terms of being a first-round exit, nah, I don't think you need playoff Jimmy to get beyond the first round with this team. It's also just a very well-rounded, good team that has Stephen fucking Curry on it. From Matas Vikelius, if Stephen Curry wins another ring and Finals MVP, he's the greatest point guard ever. In this year, I'd say that. Yeah, this year, if that happened, for sure. I don't think a Finals MVP in another championship is strictly what would separate Magic and Steph, because Magic has the 5 rings. And I believe he has 2 finals MVPs. I believe he got 2, Kareem got 2, and James Worthy got 1 in the Showtime era. But that would essentially tie them in terms of their trophy case. And then from there, or the MVPs would be in Steph's favor. I think Magic has 3. Magic Johnson has 3 MVP awards in 1987, 1989, and 1990. So 3 and 4 years. That's pretty fucking impressive for Magic there. So at that point, if you want to be like, well, their trophy case, other than save for 1 MVP, looks exactly the same, and then I just think Stephen Curry's simply the better basketball player, that's absolutely fair. But I think if you think Steph's the greatest point guard ever right now, that's completely fair. And I think if Steph had another ring in Finals MVP, it would be completely fair to think Magic Johnson is the greatest point guard of all time. I don't really care that much because in the all-time position debate, I don't know if there is a more significant mismatch in play style and ability, which on one hand, that can be interesting, but on the other, it always feels futile to compare apples and oranges. You know what I mean? Like 6'9" point guard who's like speed wise for his size, an athletic freak, the best live dribble playmaker and playmaker period in the history of basketball. No one's had the volume, the flash, the dominance in the playmaking category like Magic. And then Steph Curry, the scorer first guy who's primarily known for his 3-point shooting. That's his superpower. And he's also an all-time great playmaker, but in a way that is not conducive to averaging a bunch of assists. It's mostly off-ball playmaking, which is something that is a very impactful ability, but not one that fills a stat sheet. I think the greatest point guard of all time debate is chalk. You could go either way. It's completely reasonable to think it is Magic or Steph. But in the same way that I feel about the GOAT debate, which is that it's Mike or LeBron, and if you think any different, I don't want to talk to you about it because you're wrong. That's how I feel about the point guard debate. If you don't have Magic or Steph as your GOAT point guard, you're a silly person. You're a very silly person or an extremely narrow-minded person, or both. They're not exclusive from each other. From David Pimentel. Yeah, the mental part of that is definitely right. There's a chance the Bulls might fuck around and not only get the number 7 seed in the play-in, but upset the Celtics as well. I'm not even going to fucking bother. Not even going to bother with that one, but you get a down vote. Bad take. From Sebastian Pacheco. The lack of Kuminga's fit with the Warriors will be the reason they lose in the first round, and it will cause a rift between the coach and the GM. The GM has been very optimistic with Kuminga, but Kerr has spoken out about his fit with Draymond and Jimmy Butler as another non-spacer/shooter, which significantly hinders this team's ceiling, and the only thing he has going for him is his athleticism. It's clear he has the talent for slashing/scoring, but needs shooters to create space around him. Separately, the Warriors in general rely way too much on 3-point shooting variance, and if they end up in the play-in, they can easily lose to a Kings or Mavericks team, due to bad luck, similar to how they just lost to the Spurs. Pods is not a 32+% shooter. Neither is Moody. I don't know about that. I think they're both capable of being 40% 3-point shooters. Post seems to be a legit shooter, but when you only have 4 shooters, it severely limits the team's ceiling. On the other hand, the fact they have Curry and Butler potentially raises the ceiling to championship contenders. They can't rely on that for 4 series in a row, especially not against some of the more athletic teams in the West like the Rockets and Thunder. Well, here's the thing about that. Jonathan Kuminga doesn't have to play that much. Jonathan Kuminga will probably not be a starter on the Warriors. I damn near say that's a certainty. The spacing is just too bad when he's out there with Draymond and Jimmy. It's just simply untenable. Even if you have like Steph and Buddy Hield out there as like excellent shooting backcourt, it doesn't matter. All right. If you have 3 guys who can't shoot out there, it's going to fuck up your spacing a whole lot. I think Jonathan Kuminga, if there was like an archetype of player for him to fit into, like an all-time comp, I would say like James Worthy, like just this super athletic, slashing, rim running forward, lob target, find that guy on the break, or like find him cutting the basket in the half court. Things like that. All excellent, but he can't shoot. His jump shot's not good. It might be one day, but he needs to develop somewhere else. This is kind of similar to Josh Giddey in OKC, where it was like, maybe there's a good player here, but not on this team, not now, so stop fucking around with it. And similar to how Josh Giddey was a massive factor in OKC losing in round 2 last year, if they seriously have to play Kuminga big minutes, he could be their Josh Giddey in the same way. From 6 Happy Boy 4, the Celtics will not only repeat, but dominate every team on their way so badly that it would make last season's run look difficult in comparison. Okay, I see what you mean. Like, they've took more obstacles, but I don't think you can make it more difficult by comparison by virtue of dominating this year just because you didn't dominate as much before, which first of all, the Celtics lost 4 fucking games on their way to the title. But second of all, even if they dominated the Celtics even if they dominated the Cavs or dominated the OKC Thunder in the finals, I don't think that would make last year look difficult by comparison. I think it would make last year's Celtics look like they're just way worse than this year's Celtics. It's not a matter of it being difficult at that time so much as them just no longer fucking around even a little bit anymore. And the thing that I harped on with the Celtics in my video about not believing in them is that even though they won almost all of their playoff games, a lot of them were pretty ugly wins, which means that, that's perfectly fine in the context of what they dealt with, but when they deal with better teams, a lot of those games that were ugly wins against much worse teams will be losses against much better teams. But I don't think there's anything they could do this year that would make last year look difficult in comparison. The competition is just better. Them struggling with worse competition will not make them them dominating against better competition will not make them struggling against worse competition make it appear as though the competition last year was better. Anyone with any brain would be able to recognize that that's not the case, even if they did dominate their way to a title. That's just not, I get where your logic's coming from. I just don't think you're quite in the right area. All right, last hot take of the video, and the last hot take for quite a while. The Orlando Magic, this is from C Mello. The Orlando Magic would be a better team without Paolo. Obviously, Paolo is in a vacuum better at basketball than Franz, but in this team setting, Franz is a better fit. I don't think that means they're better without Paolo. I still think I'd rather have 2 good players than 1. But I think that Paolo this year is in a situation very similar to Cade Cunningham before that. The talent is better overall 100%, but just in terms of his efficiency being heavily mucked up by spacing problems, like Cade Cunningham's not a remarkably efficient player now, but he was a remarkably inefficient player before this year because of circumstances outside of his control. The Orlando Magic are one of the worst three-point shooting teams in basketball. So with that being the case, Paolo is not able to thrive to the extent that he should be. So maybe they'd be better without him this year. But I think we're looking at a much smaller picture here. What they do this year does not matter at all. We're not about to bench Paolo for that reason. I think the focus should just be wholeheartedly on surrounding this team with shooting in the offseason. And I think they're similar to how the Pistons went from terrible to good with increased three-point shooting ability. I think the Magic will go from all right to really good with better three-point shooting ability. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much to Nick for editing it. But that is it. Goodbye. The playoffs are here, bitch.